If it shows that it's legitimate, okay. If not, it ought to be dismantled. That's anarchism. Anarchism has nothing to do with bomb throwing and mayhem.
Get those words there!
Welcome to Anarchist Nerdvana, books, games, and beyond. Hi, I'm Jason Bayless, and these episodes will explore my personal collection of rare anarchist books, games, and other artifacts. Thanks for joining us. Today we're going to explore a book that has a crazy long title. The title is Anarchy and Anarchists, A History of the Red Terror and Social Revolution in America and Europe. Communism, Socialism, and Nihilism, and the Doctrine and Indeed. The Chicago Haymarket Conspiracy and the Detectives and Trials of the Conspirators by Michael James Schaack. Before we get into the history, let's talk about the book itself. Anarchy and Anarchists was written in 1889, and this is the first edition of the book. The page count is 683 pages. The cover is extremely fascinating to me. As you can see, it features an angel carrying a torch and a red flag with a cityscape in flames in the background and the typical round cartoon bomb exploding at her feet. The font of the title is very heavy metal, blood red and jagged. The spine of the book is just as good as you can see. The heavy metal font is featured at the top, and the art features what looks like a Medusa's head with a torch coming out of the top, and behind the head is a musket and a sword crossed laid in the shape of a X. Opening the book, you first see the wallpaper style design featuring birds and flowers, I guess to soften the hardcore cover of the book. What makes this book amazing? Well, one of the things is that it features photos and illustrations throughout. As we turn the pages, we are met with the image of Michael J. Schaack and his signature on one page and the title page on the next. As he stands with his hands on his hips, let's explore who Michael J. Schaack is. Michael J. Schaack was a Chicago police captain during the Haymarket affair in 1886, a moment when the fight for an 8-hour workday turned into a defining event for labor rights and anarchism. Schaack's book, published in the aftermath, it offers an insight into the establishment's view on anarchism and the labor movement, wrapped in the sensationalism and fear of the era. Yeah, being written by a cop who was captain during these events, I am sure you can guess that this book might not have a favorable view of labor activists and anarchists. But who was Schaack, and what motivated him to write this book? Let's dig into the context in which this narrative was crafted. The late 19th century was a period of intense social and political upheaval, with workers around the world demanding fairer conditions and the right to organize. In this cauldron of unrest, the Haymarket affair stood out as a symbol of the struggle, leading to the international recognition of May Day as a day of worker solidarity. Schaack's book captures this era's essence, offering a perspective that intertwines fear, bias, and the desire to maintain order at all costs. It's a reminder of the deep divisions and the powerful forces of change at play. Here's what he wrote in the preface of the book. It has seemed to me that there should be a history of the development, the revolt, and the tragedy of anarchy in Chicago. This history I have written as impartially and as fairly as I knew how to write it. I have kept steadily before my eyes the motto, nothing extenuate nor set down aught in malice. It will be found in the succeeding pages that neither animosity against the revolutionists nor partiality to the state has influenced the work. I have dealt with this episode in Chicago's history as calmly and as fairly as I am able. I have tried to put myself in the position of the misguided men whose conspiracy led to the Haymarket explosion and to the gallows, to understand their motives, to appreciate their ideals, for so only could this volume be properly written. And to present a broader view, I have added a history of all forms of socialism, communism, nihilism, and anarchy. In this, though necessarily brief, It has been the purpose to give all the important facts and to set forth the theories of all those who, whether moderate or radical, whether sincerely laboring in the interest of humanity or boisterously striving for notoriety, have endeavored or pretended to improve upon the existing order of society. After the dynamite bomb exploded, carrying death into the ranks of men with whom I had been for years closely associated, after an impudent attack had been made upon our law and upon our system, which I was sworn to defend, it came to me as a duty to the state, a duty to my dead and wounded comrades, to bring the guilty men to justice, to expose the conspiracy to the world, and thus to assist in vindicating the law. How the duty was performed, this story tells. It is a plain narrative whose interest lies in the momentous character of the facts which it relates. Much of it is now for the first time given to the public. I have drawn upon the records of the case, made in court, but more especially upon the reports made to me during the progress of the investigation by the many detectives who were working under my direction. I can say for my book no more than this, that from the first page to the last, there is no material statement which is not to my knowledge true. The reader, then, may at least depend upon the accuracy of the information presented here, even if I cannot make any other claim. It would be unfair and ungrateful if I did not seize this opportunity to put on lasting record my obligations to Judge Julius S. Grinnell, who was state's attorney during the investigation. His support, steady and full of tact, enabled me to go through with the work, in spite of obstacles deliberately put in my way. My position was a delicate and difficult one. Had it not been for him and for others, success would have been almost impossible. Nor can I forego this occasion to bear testimony to the magnificent police work done in the case by Inspector Bonfield and his brother, James Bonfield, and by the officers who acted directly with me. These were Lieutenant Charles A. Larson and officers Herman Schutler, Michael Whalen, Jacob Lowenstein, Michael Hoffman, Charles Rame, John Stift, and B.P. Baer. Mr. Edmund Firthman, at that time Assistant State's Attorney, as I have elsewhere recorded, worked upon the inquiry into the conspiracy with an acumen, a perseverance, and an industry which were beyond all praise. I knew, when he was first associated with me in the case, that the outcome must be a victory for outraged law, and the result vindicated the prediction. To Mr. Thomas O. Thompson and to Mr. John T. McInnes, much of the literary form of this volume is to be credited, and to them also I am under lasting obligations. Michael J. Schaack, Chicago, February 1889. In Anarchy and Anarchists, Schaack takes us through the events leading up to the Haymarket bombing, the rally, and the subsequent trial of the anarchists. His narrative is filled with detailed accounts, personal observations, and a clear bias against the anarchist movement. He is very detailed in the approach, even with his biases. Let's look at the table of contents. First, you notice that each chapter is packed full of information. Just look at Chapter 1, the beginning of anarchy, the German School of Discontent, the Socialist Future, the Asylum in London, Birth of a Word, Work of the French Revolution, the Conspiracy of Babeuf, Etienne Cabet's Experiment, the Colony in the United States, Settled at Nauvoo, Fourier and his System, the Familistère at Guise, Louis Blanc and the National Workshops, Proudhon, the founder of French anarchy, German socialism, its rise and development, Rodbertus and his followers, Capital by Karl Marx, the Bible of the Socialists, the Red Internationale, Bakunin and his expulsion from the society, the New Conspiracy, Ferdinand Lassalle and the Social Democrats, the birth of a great movement, growth of discontent, leaders after Lassalle, the central idea of the revolt, American methods and the police position. And each chapter follows the same level of detail. The second thing you notice is the table of contents is 9 pages long. As we continue our exploration of the book, the next thing you will begin to notice is all the illustrations in the book. They are simply amazing. Let's take a moment to view these images. There are roughly 200 illustrations in this book, featuring individuals, images with the titles like Fisher's Belt and Poison Daggers, Banners of the Social Revolution, Execution of the Nihilist Conspirators, and so many more. The first image we see has the title, The French Revolution, The Feast of Reason. The next is Storming the Bastille. The first words in Chapter 1 that go along with these images are, the conspiracy, which culminated in the blaze of dynamite and the groans of murdered policemen on that fatal night of May 4th, 1886, had its origin far away from Chicago and under a social system very different from ours. In order that the reader may understand the tragedy, it will be necessary for me to go back to the commencement of the agitation and to show how anarchy in this city is the direct development of the social revolt in Europe. After the red fool fury of the French had burnt itself out, the nations of the Old World, exhausted by the titanic struggle with Napoleon, lay quiet for nearly a quarter of a century. The doctrines which had brought on the reign of terror had not died. After a period of quiet, the evangel of the social revolution again began. There was uneasiness throughout Europe. In France, the Bourbons were driven out, although the cause of the people was betrayed by Louis Napoleon. In Germany, the demand for a constitution was pushed so strongly that even the sturdy Hohenzollerns had to give way before it. In Hungary, there was a popular ferment. Poland was ready for a new rising against Russia. In Russia, the movement which subsequently came to be known as nihilism was born. In Italy, Garibaldi and Mazzini were laying the foundations for the throne which the House of Savoy built upon the work of the secret societies. Nor must the reader believe that all this turmoil had not beneath it real grievances and honest causes. The peasantry and the laboring classes of Europe had been oppressed and plundered for centuries. The common people were just beginning to learn their power, and, while the excesses into which they were led were deplorable, it is not difficult to understand the causes which made the crisis inevitable. There is nothing ever lost by endeavoring to enter fairly and impartially into another's position, by trying to understand the reasons which move men and the creeds which sway them. Anarchy as a theory is as old as the schoolmen of the Middle Ages. It was gravely debated in the monasteries and supported by learned casuists 5 centuries ago. As a practice, it was first taught in France and later in Germany. It caught the unthinking, impressible throng as the proper protest against too much government and wrong government. It was ably argued by leaders capable of better things, men who turned great talents toward the destruction of society instead of its upbuilding, and the fruit of their teachings we have with us in Chicago today. From the opening paragraph, we move on to the next image of Karl Marx, with the words that set the stage for connecting anarchy with Karl Marx. It reads, "Our anarchy is of the German school, which is more nearly akin to nihilism than to the doctrines taught in France. It is founded upon the teachings of Karl Marx and his disciples, and it aims directly at the complete destruction of all forms of government and religion. It offers no solution of the problems which will arise when society, as we understand it, shall disappear, but contents itself with declaring that the duty at hand is tearing down, that the work of building up must come later." The next images that follow Marx are Mikhail Bakunin, Pierre-Joseph Proudhon, Louise Michel, and Ferdinand Lassalle, being the last image in Chapter 1. The last paragraph of this chapter reads, and should not be shocking to anyone, as this: "If our system is wrong, which I do not believe, if the principle that the majority of the citizens is to be ruled by an alien minority is to be accepted, which I do not accept, still there is the orderly and well-protected means provided by law and guaranteed by the government to transform that idea into a governing fact. There is the ballot, free to every citizen, safe, satisfying, final. The men who try other methods are rushing to their own destruction. We pity them, we sympathize with them, but our duty is clear and manifest. We have a government worth fighting for and even worth dying for, and the police feel that truth as keenly as any class in the community." From this point on, I will not visit each chapter and image in detail, but will just highlight things that I find interesting in this book. This image of the Haymarket martyrs is one I have always found interesting. As you can see, this is not the image or names of what we traditionally think of when we mention the Haymarket martyrs. This is an image of the police who were injured during the event. As you can see, the book lists their names along with this artistic rendering of the officers. In addition, it lists out in detail what happened to them. The book dedicates several pages to the officers, and it begins with this statement: "The following list will serve to show the names of the officers killed and wounded, the stations they belonged to, their residences, the nature of their wounds, their condition, and other circumstances." For example, it reads, Michael Sheehan, 3rd Precinct. Residence, number 163 Barber Street, wounded in the back just below the 9th rib. The bullet lay in the abdomen, and after its removal by the surgeon, he collapsed and died on the 9th of May. He was 29 years of age, born in Ireland, and came to America in 1879. He joined the force December 15, 1884, and had only one relative in America, a brother, his parents still living in the old country. He was a very bright, prompt, and efficient officer, and had excellent prospects before him. He was unmarried. And then again, later in the book, on May 10th, I made a post-mortem examination on the body of Michael Sheehan. He died from exhaustion caused by a pistol shot wound upon the right side of the abdomen, 3 inches to the right and 4 inches above the umbilicus. The ball passed through the mesentery and lower part of the liver into the muscles of the abdomen. There was considerable blood in the abdomen and the liver. The surroundings were very much inflamed. Moving deeper into the book, we come across this image. It is an image of Ling's revolver, and it is fascinating to me just because the description reads, Ling's revolver, cocked is found when wrested from Ling's hands after the struggle with Officer Schwettler. From a photograph. Everything about this statement and image makes me scratch my head. For those curious, Louis Ling was one of the Haymarket anarchists convicted of the Haymarket bombing. This cartoon of the struggle is also fascinating. This image is called Munzenberg Peddling Bombs and Books. Just a couple of guys hanging out, trading books and bombs. Typical anarchist doings. Chapter 16 is very interesting because it outlines how the police targeted anarchists and suspected anarchists. The opening paragraphs read, the anarchists, both in and out of prison, had begun to discover about this time that there was a law in the land and that its majesty would be vindicated. They were confronted with stubborn, serious facts, and they realized that they were in a world of perplexities. They had been circumvented at every step in their efforts at concealment, and their plot had been revealed in its most essential parts. Their leaders had been gathered in, and their comrades were being arrested every day. Cunning and shrewd as they supposed themselves to be, they had discovered that society was equal to the task of probing their secrets. At first, they had assumed an air of bravado and indifference, but seeing how easily their bluff could be called and how closely we had the record of each, they realized that evasion or silence was not calculated either to keep their necks out of the halter or to save them from the penitentiary. Those arrested nearly all turned craven cowards, and this situation of affairs did not contribute to the comfort of those still outside who were in momentary dread of apprehension. Arrest followed arrest, and Mr. Firthman and I were kept exceedingly busy in directing the taking of confessions and assimilating the material for future use. Still, the good work went on. The first victim, after the Herman brothers, to fall under police control was Herman Munzenberg. He was arrested on the evening of May 20th at 8 o'clock, and the circumstances attending his arrest were somewhat peculiar. On the evening in question, Officers Schwettler and Hoffman were transferring the Herman brothers from the Larrabee Street station to the Chicago Avenue station. They boarded an open streetcar with their prisoners, whom they placed on a rear seat facing front, stationing themselves immediately behind on the platform. In the middle of the car, facing to the rear, sat a stranger. Presently, the officers noticed that the man was making signs to the Hermans. In response, Lawrence Herman placed his right hand over his mouth. This was followed by another sign from the stranger. Officer Schwettler recognized the fact that the man was a friend of the Hermans, and he requested the prisoners not to divulge the officer's identity. The stranger seemed to be in doubt about something, left his seat, and placing himself at the side of Abraham Herman, started a conversation. He appeared to be an old acquaintance. This was sufficient for the officers. When the car reached the corner of Wells Street and Chicago Avenue, the stranger was about to leave. He was quietly told by the officers not to trouble himself just then to get off the car, but to keep his seat a little while longer. Naturally, the man was surprised at this request of men whom he did not know, and indignantly declined to ride any farther. The officers promptly told him to consider himself under arrest, and not to move if he valued his life. They had in the meantime recognized the man as the little fellow who had carried the satchel filled with dynamite bombs to Neff's Hall, along with Ling. It was Herman Munzenberg, And another one of my favorite images in the book is an anarchist Sunday school, teaching unbelief and lawlessness. The text that is associated reads, "The most conspicuous feature of the propaganda of the Internationale in Chicago today is the Sunday school movement. There are now 4 of these schools in successful and established operation, and a number of others are fairly started. The first was opened in the spring of 1888 at Lakeview by the socialistic Turnverein. The second was begun in August 1888 at Jefferson by the Turnverein Fortschritt. The third was commenced in September at Thalia Hall by the Arbiter Bildungsverein of the Northwest Side, and the fourth was started at 58 Clybourne Avenue by the Arbiter Bildungsverein of the North Side. The school at Lakeview is frequented by about 190 children. The school of the Turnverein Fortschritt has from 40 to 50 pupils. The school of the Northwest Side was visited on Sunday, December 9th, 1888, by 230 children, and this Verein will have to rent another hall, as the present one is not large enough to accommodate all the pupils. The Northside School was attended by about 100 children on the same day. All schools are under the supervision of the one organized on December 9th, 1888, at Aurora Turn Hall. The main mission of this school is the organization of others. It can easily be seen that the schools now established are prospering because the number of pupils is increasing from day to day. The schools are of socialistic and anarchistic origin. Nothing is taught relating to dynamite or bombs. The German language is used in all the schools, and all the ordinary branches of education are embraced in the curriculum, but underneath and above all is the spirit of contempt for law and religion. The children are instructed that religion is nothing but a humbug, that there exists no God and no devil, no heaven and no hell, and that Christianity is only a preventive system adopted by the capitalists to rule the working people and keep them under. After this, they are to be taught the spirit of revolution. In all, the main point is agitation for socialism and anarchy. As showing the spirit of the anarchist Sunday schools, I append the following appeal for Christmas presents from the Arbiter Zeitung of December 7th, 1888. It seems to me that it leaves very little to be said, except perhaps to point out that 58 Clybourne Avenue is a low-class groggery, and that it was in the very room in which the school is held, that the anarchists who were to carry out Engels' plan on the 4th of May, 1886, secured their supplies of dynamite and bombs, Christmas presents for the scholars of the Sunday School of the North Side. The Arbiter Bildungsverein of the North Side held a meeting December 3rd and adopted the following. A presentation of Christmas presents and a lottery for the children of the Sunday School will be held at 58 Clybourne Avenue on Christmas Day. Everyone is invited who has an interest in taking from the clergy the power over our little ones, and who will help us to educate our children to become useful persons. Also parents, their friends, and business people who are willing to contribute a small sum of money for the benefit of this noble cause. Leave your contributions for the presentation of Christmas presents or for the dressing of the Christmas tree for the dear little ones until Saturday, December 22nd, with the committee, number 58, Clybourne Avenue. Receipts for presents will be published in the Arbiter Zeitung, Arbeiter Bildungsverein. History tells us that in the aftermath of the bombing, authorities launched a sweeping crackdown on anarchists, labor leaders, and activists, leading to the arrest of many individuals suspected of being involved in the event or associated with the movement. Initially, the police arrested approximately 60 people in connection with the Haymarket affair. However, this number grew as the investigation expanded, with the authorities focusing on the broader anarchist movement and labor activists rather than on finding those directly responsible for the bombing. The book also has a long list of anarchists and socialists that the police cataloged during the crackdown after the Haymarket events. There are 392 names in this list. That is a lot of anarchists and socialists in Chicago. It also lists all the meeting places of anarchist groups in Chicago prior to May 4th, 1886. I might add these listings to a Radical Guides map. Leave a comment if you would like to see these listings on the map. The book ends with this paragraph. Let none mistake either the purpose or the devotion of these fanatics, nor their growing strength. This is methodic, not a haphazard conspiracy. The ferment in Russia is controlled by the same heads and the same hands as the activity in Chicago. There is a cold-blooded, calculating purpose behind this revolt, manipulating every part of it, the world over to a common and ruinous end. Whether the next demonstration of the Red Terror will occur where its disciples are goaded to desperation under despotic measures, as in the land of the Tsar or in our own country, where they are allowed to preach its bloody doctrines under a broad construction of the American constitutional right of free speech, time alone can tell. But believe me, anarchy is not an enemy for society to despise. While Schaack's account provides valuable insights into the period's societal fears and the establishment's response to anarchism, it's crucial to critique the biases and motivations behind his narrative. How does Schaack's portrayal of anarchists compare to modern understandings of the movement? And what can this tell us about the role of narrative in shaping historical memory? This discussion will not only shed light on the book's content, but also invite us to think critically about the sources of our historical knowledge. As we close this chapter on Anarchist Nirvana, I want to thank you for staying with us on this journey. And I want to invite you to become a member of our Patreon community. Your support makes episodes like this possible. Your support fuels our quest and supports radical education, making all the difference. Stay tuned for our next episode, where we'll uncover more artifacts of resistance and change. Thank you for watching, and remember, follow ideas, not people.
If it shows that it's legitimate, okay. If not, it ought to be dismantled. That's anarchism.